Wu Zetian was the first woman to rule China as emperor, and no one has followed since. Her reign created both order and fear, and left behind a legacy of achievement and controversy. During her era, the empire functioned with remarkable efficiency. Yet beneath that stability lay a system of rule that was uncompromising and severe. This contradiction has made Wu Zetian one of the most difficult figures in Chinese history to judge. Her claim to imperial power was itself an act of transgression. Imperial China was a political system designed by men and built to serve men. Women were structurally excluded from political authority. Wu Zetian took the title of emperor and placed herself at the apex of power, directly confronting an order built on male rule. Yet history carries its own irony. Wu Zetian's success did not create lasting institutional space for women. After her death, a social backlash against female authority intensified rather than diminished. Women were pushed back into safer, more controllable roles. As a result, Wu Zetian's rise became a historical exception, one that could not be repeated. Her life cannot be understood simply as the ascent of an individual. She reshaped how the empire functioned, and how later generations understood women's place within political power. What she left behind was not merely a judgment of her reign, but unresolved historical questions about authority, institutions, and gender. To understand Wu Zetian, we need to take her life apart piece by piece. How she entered the system of power, how she transformed it, and why her success ultimately became something history itself could not bear. Wu Zetian was born Wu Mei. At 14, she entered the palace as a lowest rank in the Imperial Harem under Emperor Taizong of Tang, and remained so throughout the Zhenguan era. During this period, Emperor Taizong received a fierce horse from Central Asia, known as the lion steed. No one could tame it. Standing nearby, Wu spoke up, claiming she could subdue the horse if given 3 tools: an iron whip, a pair of iron claws, and a dagger. If the whip failed, she would strike its head with the claws. If it still resisted, she would cut its throat. If it would not serve me, it would be killed. Taizong recognized her force of will and immediately wary of it. This was not a will imperial ideology permitted women to possess. Instead of drawing her closer, Taizong kept his distance. In Taizong's final years, Li Zi, the imperial heir, was regularly present during the emperor's illness. During this period, Li and Wu began a private relationship, one that unfolded while the emperor was still alive, violated court order, and quietly laid the groundwork for her return to power. Around the same time, a prophecy began to spread within and beyond the court, that a woman of the Wu clan would rule the realm. What it implied was far more unsettling: the possibility that a woman of the Wu clan might rise above the Li imperial house. For Wu, the prophecy was neither protection nor blessing. It was a shadow cast far ahead of her. In 649, Emperor Taizong died. By custom, childless concubines were sent to Buddhist convents. Wu was shaved and sent to Ganyi Temple. She was formally expelled from the political order and removed from the historical record. But the real story was only beginning. When Emperor Gaozong took power, he quickly turned his attention back to Wu. 1 year after Taizong passed away, Gaozong visited Ganyi Temple under the pretext of ritual observance and secretly met Wu. Shortly afterward, he brought her back into the palace, setting the stage for her return to the heart of power. Back in the court, Wu gave birth to 4 sons and a daughter for Gaozong. These births secured her position in the harem and laid a solid foundation for her future political ambitions. Meanwhile, she gradually consolidated power within both the inner court and the imperial administration. Within the inner court, she moved decisively. After her daughter was born, she took lethal action. During a visit by Empress Wang, Wu quietly killed the infant, framed Wang for the murder, using the child's death as a weapon to eliminate her rival. In the imperial administration, she built strategic alliances with officials from non-aristocratic backgrounds to challenge the powerful. Guanzhong noble clans represented by Empress Wang and consort Zhao. Empress Wang embodied old aristocratic legitimacy. Consort Zhao came from the prestigious Zhao clan and had borne sons, a symbol of entrenched elite power. Combining imperial authority with bureaucratic support, Wu first deposed Empress Wang on charges of infanticide, then accused consort Zhao of poisoning. Both were stripped of rank, imprisoned, and ultimately killed. Each move was calculated, precise, and ruthless. A deadly choreography that cleared the path to power while sending a message. The old order would no longer dominate. Even after eliminating her rivals, Wu still faced resistance from senior nobles like Chengxin Wuji and Chu Soliang, who sought to preserve traditional power structures. But as Gaozong's health deteriorated, Wu took over the handling of state affairs, steadily consolidating real authority. Once formally installed as empress, she launched systematic purges against aristocratic factions. These actions dismantled entrenched noble power, solidified bureaucratic governance, and cleared the way for her eventual claim to the power. The Tang dynasty was no longer ruled by hereditary privilege. It became a state governed by merit, loyalty, and Wu's iron will. In Gaozong's later years, as the emperor's health declined, Wu Zetian began wielding power from behind the curtain. She reviewed memorials, appointed officials, and controlled the political core. While Gaozong retained mostly symbolic authority, she then carried out sweeping institutional reforms, reshaping the state from top to bottom. Genealogical registers were revised, ranking families by official position rather than lineage. Civil service examinations were reformed and improved, and she personally oversaw palace exams, insisting on literary excellence, a move that helped lay the cultural groundwork for the golden age of Tang poetry. Military recruitment was strengthened, securing the empire's borders and consolidating state stability. After Gaozong's death, Li Xian ascended the throne. Wu Zetian ruled in her own right as Empress Dowager, assuming direct authority. When Li Xian attempted to promote his father-in-law, challenging her absolute control, she swiftly ousted him and set his younger brother Li Dan up as emperor, who served little more than a puppet. She then restructured the political core. The traditional three departments were replaced with new institutions that ended the Guanzhong nobility's monopoly on power. The capital was moved to Luoyang, renamed the Divine Capital, and monumental architecture rose across the city, its visual and spatial presence proclaiming a new political order. Once her power was consolidated, Wu Zetian built a comprehensive framework of legitimacy, religious legitimacy. Buddhist clerics compiled commentaries on the Great Cloud Sutra, proclaiming her a prophesied female ruler and an incarnation of Maitreya. Temples were built nationwide, and sermons spread the message of her divine mandate. She declared herself the Golden Wheel Emperor, using Buddhist symbolism to reinforce her sacred authority. Institutional legitimacy. Laws were reformed, the bureaucracy centralized around loyal officials, and the new character Zhao was created for her name, symbolizing rule beyond sun and moon. New ceremonial centers were constructed, creating both a political and spiritual hub. Merit-based legitimacy. Talent was promoted regardless of birth. The state remained stable, culture flourished, and no nationwide rebellion succeeded. Even after her fall, history continued to recognize her reign as legitimate. In 690, Wu Zetian formally ascended the throne in Luoyang. Emperor Li Dan abdicated. Ministers submitted petitions urging her to rule, and she proclaimed herself emperor, founding the Zhou dynasty. She became the first and only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor, marking the official beginning of the Wu Zhou dynasty and her unprecedented rule. Having declared herself emperor, Wu Zetian held absolute power, ruling over an empire defined by two parallel realities: efficient administration and pervasive fear. She dismantled the old aristocratic power structures and established new institutions, breaking the monopoly of the Guanzhong noble clans. Officials now owed loyalty to the state rather than their family networks. At the same time, she strengthened the empire's surveillance system, increasing the number of censors and empowering them to report misconduct at any time. Under this system, officials approached every decision with extreme caution, knowing that a single accusation could ruin their careers or even end their lives. Wu Zetian also reformed access to the imperial administration. Civil and military examinations were restructured and improved. She personally oversaw palace exams, and talented individuals were allowed to recommend themselves. Family background no longer determined advancement, and talent was promoted on merit. This reform brought large numbers of commoners into government and solidified the regime's social base. Yet openness coexisted with terror. She encouraged denunciations through official censors and the use of bronze boxes for secret reports, employed notorious secret police such as Su Yuanli, Lei Junchen, and Zhou Xing, and used torture and fabricated charges to crush opponents. Many officials reportedly said farewell to their families before court sessions, never certain they would return alive. Ideologically, she orchestrated continuous propaganda. Buddhist legitimacy was promoted nationwide. Monks compiled commentaries on the Great Cloud Sutra, proclaiming her as the prophesied female ruler. Temples were built, and itinerant clerics spread her divine mandate. She personally performed imperial rites, asserting her authority as a ruler chosen by heaven. Militarily, she secured the empire's borders, reconquered lost territories in the west, and decisively suppressed rebellions. Economically, she maintained land policies, encouraged reclamation, eased burdens, and ensured fiscal stability. On succession, she opted for compromise rather than radical disruption, binding the Wu clan to the Tang lineage through marriage and political arrangements, and restoring Li Xian as imperial heir to ensure a controlled transition. Her reign combined institutional reform, ideological control, and political terror into a coherent system, an administration that ran efficiently while keeping everyone under constant tension. It was a governance model that transformed fear into order and left a lasting mark on Chinese history. In her later years, strain began to surface in Wu Zetian's rule. Increasingly, she delegated authority to those closest to her, most notably the Zhang brothers, Zhang Yizi and Zhang Changzong. Their rapid rise provoked widespread resentment at court. More dangerously, the Zhang brothers began targeting members of the Li imperial clan. The royal relatives were framed and driven to suicide, shattering the already fragile balance between the Wu and Li factions, and igniting deep anger across the political elite. By 705, the situation reached a breaking point. A group of senior officials led by Zhang Jianzi launched a palace coup. The Zhang brothers were killed within the palace. Troops surrounded the residence, and the imperial heir Li Shan entered the palace in person under armed escort. The coup remained tightly contained. No civil war followed. No nationwide unrest erupted. Wu Zetian was forced to abdicate and was moved to Shangyang Palace, where she lived in effective confinement. With her removal, the Wuzhou regime came quietly to an end. Yet her final political choice remains the most revealing. Before her death, Wu Zetian issued a final edict in which she relinquished the title of emperor and resumed that of empress, formally returning authority to the Tang dynasty. This was not surrender, but calculation. By doing so, she shielded the Wu family from total political retribution, secured a peaceful transfer of power, and ensured that her reign would be absorbed into Tang legitimacy rather than permanently branded as usurpation. In the final chapter of her life, she chose to stabilize what she had built and to close the era on her own terms. Wu Zetian died thereafter. The Zhou dynasty was abolished, and the Tang was restored. She was buried alongside Emperor Gaozong at Qinling. Before her tomb stood a single stone stele, left completely blank. Wu Zetian's life defies simple judgment. She was the only woman to rule China as emperor. Her success shattered patriarchal assumptions, but also intensified later restrictions on women. Practices like foot binding hardened in the centuries that followed, fueled by anxiety over female power. She ended aristocratic politics, strengthened bureaucratic governance, and expanded cultural and institutional possibilities. But she paid a high personal price, and her era bore the strain of relentless pressure. The Blank Stele is not silence. It is an acknowledgement. Some figures exceed praise and blame. Some histories do not require a final verdict.